So if you have clicked on this video, you probably are aware of how long it is. And I just kind of want to brace you for the, I guess, complexity of the read. I read in two stages. So I read in terms of the cards themselves, what's actually happening in the cards. But then I actually read the energy attached to the cards, right? And then I start reading the astrological energy, and then I start talking about transits. So I try to be as I try to explain as much as I possibly can throughout the read, and that's why it's so long, is so that I can give context to the things that I'm saying. I like for the people that listen to my reads to be reading along with me, and understand that I don't have any underlying personal intentions when I'm doing my readings. I don't have any biases. What I have going on in my life is not seeping into the read, because I do feel like a lot of readers can't separate what's going on with them versus what's going on with their audience. So I'm very mindful of that. And that's why I spend a lot of time in my readings, as you'll see if you stick with me, breaking down the thought process, breaking down the energy, breaking down the cards, breaking down the symbolism, so that you can follow along and you can understand where these messages come from. And most of these messages are intuitive for sure, but the intuition is flowing with the energy, with the illustration, etc. And so I'm sharing that with you throughout this read. Also be aware that I will not be reading for specific signs, but I will be reading for specific energy or energetic signatures. And the energetic signature that I'm reading for is Pluto energy, or someone going through a Plutonian phase. So if you are Plutonian born, and I'll have a separate video linked below that details what it means to be Plutonian, what it means to be going through a Plutonian phase, you will probably resonate the most with my readings overall, right? And it doesn't matter if you are a Scorpio or an Aries or a Taurus or whatever. If you have the Plutonian signature in your chart, most likely 9 times out of 10, my readings will resonate with you. So these are the people that I'm targeting. And it's not going to be a big group. Actually, it probably will be a fairly sizable group, but my energy may not jive with other people either. I'm a Plutonian. And I feel like navigating life as a Plutonian can be really rough. So it's really sometimes a conversation with versions of myself, like past versions of myself, most likely. But really, it's a conversation with you going through these transits and not understanding what's happening. Because if you don't understand energy, especially in the manner that I've come to understand it, like life just seems overwhelming as a Plutonian. Or if you're somebody who's never gone through a Plutonian phase before and you don't know what Pluto energy looks like and feels like, and then you're suddenly smacked with it for 22 years straight, like you don't know how to cope with it. So my objective is to make that transition and that phase and that period of life easy for those going through it as well. So, like I said, I'm going to link in the description box below a whole video on what it's like to be a Plutonian or go through a Plutonian phase, how to identify whether or not you are a Plutonian or you're going through a Plutonian phase, and what are some of the themes that are going to be coming up when you are Plutonian or going through a Plutonian phase. So stay tuned for that. If it's not already linked in the description box below, it will be. And I think that that's my main message. So let's just dive into the reading. This reading feels very heavy at first, very like somebody's really weighed down. And the weight that they have had all this time is going to be lifted, because part of the reason that they've had this weight is because they haven't closed a door. And The difficult part about closing the door is that you're attached to the things that are in the room you're supposed to leave, right? Like you have this attachment, dare I say this unhealthy attachment, to something, and that attachment is keeping you from making progress. It's keeping you from progressing. It's keeping you stuck, right? Sometimes the thing that we keep trying to hold on to is the thing that is going to keep us from the blessings and the gifts that could be given to us if we just let it go. Because a lot of the time, when we're clinging to something that we need to let go of, what we're doing is we're not allowing space for something newer, something better to come in. That thing that we're clinging to is taking up the space of that new and better thing. So I get the impression that somebody is coming out of that space, that mental space, that spiritual space even, where they're stuck, right? They're going to unstick themselves by closing a chapter, finishing a project, finishing a task, being done with something, being done with someone even. Because it kind of feels like it's not worth it. And I feel like somebody's placing more value on the thing than really exists. And because they're placing so much value on this thing that they're holding on to, they can't receive anything higher than that, any higher value. This could also be impertinence to a job or a career situation. Like you're holding on for dear life to this job, or you're holding on for dear life to this career path, or whatever the case may be, because there is this heaviness in terms of like earth energy, and earth energy is very like tangible, very monetary, very, very career and job oriented, right? So you might feel stuck in this place, but you can't get out of the place unless you just walk out and close the door, right? And walking out and closing the door is letting go of things in that space. And that is scary. Candidly, I think that is part of the reason someone isn't letting go, is because they have no idea what's on the other side of the closed door, right? They have no idea what's next. And even the reading, to an extent, it doesn't tell you all the way what's next, but it does tell you that you progress, right? You make progress after this. So ultimately, you're moving away from a situation that had you stuck by closing the door on that situation. You're closing a cycle, ending a life season, etc., that keeps you stuck. And now you're actually moving forward. You're making progress. Now, the way that this progress comes out is interesting because it is a Six of Swords progress. So my impression is that someone eventually turns their back to the thing that had them stuck. But in the process of moving forward, they still have a little bit, dare I say baggage, a little bit of baggage. But that baggage serves as a reminder, as a lesson to like not go back to that place. It also serves as a reminder or a lesson in terms of like, you learn from this situation so that you don't have to go back to it. And I think that keeping the circumstances in the forefront of your mind that led you to a stuck place will allow you to never go back to that place again, right? Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is I think eventually you do learn your lesson on this thing, whatever this thing is. whatever this attachment is, whatever this stubbornness is, whatever this rigidity is. I'm hearing conservative. And I'm not really interested in the politics of this because, I mean, this is not a political channel at all. What your politics are is really none of my business. It's yours. But I feel like that's really an interesting thing coming up. And that really just kind of threw me. It just kind of threw me for a loop. That part of the message just threw me for a loop. Because I'm hearing from conservative to liberal. And, oh, God. So, definitely wasn't expecting that to come out of this. But, so I'm gonna explain the energy. And then I'm going to explain to you why I got that message, why that message came through. So you have the cards, the Four of Pentacles, the World, and Six of Swords. Each of those cards represents an astrological archetype, right? So the Four of Pentacles represents the Sun in Capricorn. The World represents Saturn. And the Six of Swords represents Mercury in Aquarius, okay? So Saturn is the ruling planet of Capricorn, but it's also the co-ruling planet of Aquarius. Aquarius's primary ruling planet is Uranus, but we won't get into those specifics. We're just going to stick with the Saturn part because the Saturn part, the World card, is probably the most pivotal part of this reading. It's the most important part. It's the only major arcana card, but also the planet Saturn rules both of the signs of the two cards on either side. And what's interesting is on one side, on the left side, Saturn and Capricorn, you have this rigidity, this stubbornness, this inability to move or to budge or you can't really maneuver, right? There's just I'm hearing stuck in a box, right? Stuck in a box. And on the other side, you have someone turning their back to their past and moving in a different direction. But the direction that you're moving in, it feels uncertain, right? There's this uncertainty about this movement forward. There's this sense that there's land on the horizon. Maybe you know where you're going, maybe you don't. But there's an inevitability about you getting somewhere, you arriving somewhere, you getting there, right? And sometimes with the Capricorn Saturn archetype, you don't ever really go anywhere. You just kind of stay in your bubble with a specific status, with, a specific neighborhood, with specific group of people. You're really into all the labels and stuff like that. And, but you feel like what it feels like is someone's not able to truly be themselves or to be free or to explore, because exploring, there's all these different ways in which exploring makes it hard for you to stay true to your values, because Four of Pentacles is values, to stay true to your values. So if you're clinging to these values and you can't move outside of those values, it kind of makes life really, how do I say it? It makes life dull. I don't know how else to say it. It can make life a little bit dull, especially if there's facets of you that don't really align with these values that you're clinging really hard to, right? If there's facets of you that wants to explore outside of that value structure, it's going to be hard for you to remain in that structure without being a hypocrite, right? And so for someone, that's the message. Like you're going to be transitioning from conservative to liberal. And it's going to be really awkward, right? It's going to be really awkward, the liberal part, because I feel like you've been in this state, this mind state, this kind of rigid, kind of stubborn, kind of like, you must be this and you must do this. And if you're not that, you're bad, right? like you've been in that mind state for so long. And now you're closing the door on that. And there's this new world. There's this totally new world that's opening before you. And you don't move into this world without sorrow. Especially like, okay, I think everything is everything, right? I don't have a preferred state. Like, I think that there is a necessity for conservatism and there is a necessity for liberalism. But liberalism to the extreme or conservatism to the extreme are both horrible. So, you know what I mean? Like, they're both insane, right? And we've seen this politically. Like I said, I'm not trying to get political, but we've seen it. There's some nutty people out there, right? So what I will say is this. There's a time to be conservative. And I think there's a time to be liberal, right? And that's kind of what Saturn rules is it's about time. And I feel like somebody has reached a point in time where that structure no longer works for them because that's not really who they are deep down. But I think the other part is this. When I say you're moving forward, but not without like some trepidation, is that you're leaving behind a community. You're leaving behind a version of yourself that everybody has gotten to know you as. You're leaving behind a way of thinking and a way of doing and a way of being. You're leaving behind a routine. You're leaving behind, everything that you identified with. You're leaving behind an identity, right? And so that's why the Six of Swords is the progress card, because the progress or the moving forward part, the part where you're making progress or you're becoming more progressive, you're making this progress, but it's going to hurt a little bit because of what you're turning your back to. Because some of it can't come with you. Some of the people that you love and you care about can't come with you because they can't even fathom what you're going through right now. They're not on the frequency to be able to consciously grasp the transition that you're going through. That's tough. Now, what is interesting and what is comforting about this reading to me personally is the way that the transition happens. So somebody is kind of lonely in it to an extent with the Four of Pentacles, because if you notice, the Four of Pentacles and the World character are both, they're kind of in their little, like the World Cup character is kind of like in their little bubble, right? Which I think is funny because I feel like conservative or liberal, they're both in their little bubbles and they really like neither the twain shall meet, right? But on the Four of Pentacles side, somebody's like rigid and they're structured to a point of like being stuck, but they're also stuck by themselves. Like they're lonely. There's nobody around them. It's just them and their pentacles. It's just them and their values. And then on the other side, after they've closed this chapter, they've closed this door, this phase, they are accompanied by people. So you're not going to be going through this alone. I feel like you're going to find a community if you have not already. There's going to be community. And most likely, because we have Mercury in Aquarius ruling the Six of Swords cards, it's going to be like-minded individuals. It's going to be people who are on similar journeys as you. People who have gone through the things that you've gone through. Or similar things that you have gone through. I'm sorry to focus so heavily on this, but that's the fact that came out. This part of the message initially was not going to, like, it didn't even cross my mind. But when I started looking at the astrological archetypes, the message just rushed into my head, and it was like, get this part out now. So that's interesting. That's really interesting. Whoever you are, interested in knowing about your journey, would love to hear about it in the comments. But yeah, aside from conservative to liberal thing, this is really just somebody going through a transition in life where they're closing a chapter and they realize that they've been stuck all this time and they're freeing themselves up. But it's not without, some, I'd even dare say regrets. With the Six of Swords, sometimes it feels like regret. Like, I regret that I did that, or I regret that I said that, or I regret I stayed that long, or I regret that, I didn't, take the opportunity to do the other thing, or whatever the case may be. There feels like there's some regret here, but the regret isn't that you have to move on. The regret is the stuckness. The regret lies with what you were doing when you were stuck. Right? It's almost like somebody feels like they could have been unstuck a long time ago. I'm just getting that message. I don't think that shows up in the actual cards, but that's what it feels like. Like, I could have got out of this long time ago, but I didn't. And I regret that I didn't. Right? So the world to me has always felt like an incubation period. And I think that that's kind of what you're going through now. Like, you're in your chrysalis. And if you know anything about tarot, in the tarot cards, most of the court cards, if I'm not mistaken, in the swords arcana, the swords minor arcana, or the air minor arcana, features a butterfly, right? So typically, you're going to go through this painful process, this process of shedding something, transforming into something different, right? And the Aquarius cards, especially the King of Swords, there's very prominent butterflies. You're in that chrysalis right now. That's kind of what the world is, and you're transforming into this butterfly. So you're going to become something totally different than you were. And even if you think about the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, a caterpillar has this slowness about it. It doesn't move very fast, right? And it's very earthy. It's very like moving along the leaf, just inching by, right? Four of Pentacles, I mean, candidly, it doesn't even look like it's inching by. It just looks like it's stuck there like a statue. But, it goes from this earth element to this air element, which is precisely what this reading is talking about, going from pentacle, earth, to sword, which is air. But there's this incubation period, this chrysalis period in the middle. So you are going through a metamorphosis. You're going through a transition. You're going through a phase, and the version of you that's going to be on the other side, you'll never be able to go back to the other form. Like a butterfly can never become a caterpillar again. Like, you are not going to be able to be the same person that you were prior to this metamorphosis. You will not be able to go back. And that's why I think also the Six of Swords is such an interesting card to come after this, the World card. Like, you're not going to be the same. And some of that's going to sting a little bit because there's going to be a lot that you have to leave behind. And that might include things that you used to love, people you used to love, cities you used to love, right? Some of you also might be relocating since we do have the world here. Four of Pentacles is stuck in a city or some kind of suburb or whatever, and they're not making any progress, so they have to relocate. So I do feel like somebody is also relocating. Maybe they're moving out of a specific state. Maybe they're moving out of a specific city. Maybe they're moving out of a specific country. They don't want to. They don't, but they, for whatever reason, they're not. There's no progress here, so they have to do something. And eventually, the decision is going to be to move on, to go somewhere else where there is progress, where there is possibilities, where there is potential. So I feel like I've touched on the main things here. But I do want to note one more thing, and that's materialism. So this is not going to apply to everyone. Obviously, all of these messages aren't going to apply to everyone. It's general. But I see someone who has like a very materialistic outlook. And they're really stuck in that outlook. Like when I say materialistic, I mean like everything's about money and the special car and the special house and the flashy clothes and the special little watch thing. It's like name brand this, name brand that, and we eat at these special restaurants and we go to these special clubs, and it's very statusy. And the way that I feel about the Four of Pentacles from a status perspective is it's exclusive. Like you don't want to invite just anybody in, right? You want to establish yourself as different from those other people. Like you're not one of the poors, God forbid. But, ultimately, that is kind of where somebody's at when they start this reading. Now, I don't know if some point along the way they get new light and in enters the world. Maybe somebody travels. By the way, I do see travel here. Like maybe somebody was stuck doing something all this time and now they're traveling, and maybe there's a little nomadicness about it. But I feel like somebody's stuck in this status-seeking, status-driven, type of energy. And then, but what's funny, again, like I said, with the Four of Pentacles, it feels lonely. You feel isolated from other people, which is the point at first, because you don't want to be one of the poors, but you also are isolated from true connection. So transitioning from status-driven to connection on the other side. But the way that the connection shows up is it's almost like somebody's distancing themselves from a specific environment so that they can have connection. Like they're moving to a totally different place. Definitely see somebody moving to a totally different place. They're relocating, they're traveling, they're doing the thing. They're getting the F out of wherever they've been. They know that they're stuck there. They know that there's no progress here. There's nothing to see here, right? They've been there, done that. But I feel like somebody is making a transition from being like really like status driven to just like seeing life in a different way, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting nice things. I feel like in a lot of spiritual spaces, there's this over emphasis on humility and having very little. And I've always felt that was very strange. And the reason I've always felt that was very strange is because in my mind, when I think about spirituality, I think about becoming a master of your gifts, your tools, right? And what better way to exhibit mastery than the physical manifestation of that mastery? I mean, to me, it feels pretty obvious that you would want to do that. You would want to be able to bring spirit down into form. That's kind of the point. But when you make your whole personality about your stuff, yeah, absolutely. I think that's ridiculous. But and I feel like that's kind of what this reading is about. It's about somebody who made their whole personality about stuff. Like stuff that fundamentally is just it's so empty, bro. And you know it, you feel it, and you're eventually going to make a transition at some point. Do I think that you're just going to give away all your ish and just like run away to another country or another city or whatever? Maybe. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I do feel like there's this complete and total reinvention in here, which is really interesting that the way that the reinvention is showing up is through Saturn. Because normally I would expect to see Pluto in the cards itself. But since this channel is a Plutonian channel, it's going to be Plutonian anyway. So it is what it is. But yeah, I feel like it's so funny because someone's transforming, no matter what the situation is, somebody's transforming from one form to another. But the form that you take is just another side or another face of the same energy. And what I mean by that is just Saturn, since it rules Capricorn and it co-rules Aquarius, you're just going from one form of Saturn to another. So it's like you're trying to experience the richness or the fullness of Saturn, which is really interesting. I feel like this will allow you to be more balanced, but I think that you're going to lean towards the Aquarian energy. You're going to want to be free. You're going to want to be social. You're going to want to network. You're going to want, there might be some exploration of, different kinds of people, different races, different genders, different religions, So this is interesting. I did not expect this reading to go this far or this long. I'm so sorry if it's too long for you, but I had to get all of this out. Share your story with me in the comments. I'm super interested in who this applies to, how it applies to you. And I'll see you on the next one. I want to add a key detail and explain this energy a little bit because I mentioned, I was like, this is really interesting that this is being communicated in this way, but there's actually no Pluto energy in the reading. And then I said fundamentally that this channel is a Plutonian channel. So Pluto doesn't have to show up in the cards itself. The Plutonian theme is going to be present, right? In every reading. And I've explained that part, like what that looks like. Well, the thing about being a Plutonian is that you're impacted by the transit of Pluto, right? And what it looks like to me is that this reading is describing the transition that someone's going through from one energy to another. And we just left the Pluto in Capricorn season. I forget how long it lasted, like maybe like 18 to 20 years, right? And we've entered the Pluto in Aquarius season, right? And I think that's going to last like something like 22 years, right? So this reading is basically kind of following that trajectory of Pluto, where originally somebody was either stuck or stagnant or maybe even possibly conservative. Maybe they were more status seeking, a little bit more rigid, a little bit more stiff in their values or in their approach to life or in their approach to their career. And I think that somebody was very much security focused because Capricorn really cares about security. It really cares about stability, right? And what's interesting about the way that stability is being communicated is the Four of Pentacles, where there's this attachment to something. And you're so attached to it that you can't move. There's no flexibility, right? And I kind of want to make a note about career stability, because as you can see, at the recording of this video, there's been a lot of layoffs and a lot of discussion on what career security looks like. And people finding out that it might not exist in this particular phase of life. What's interesting is a lot of the layoffs are occurring in the tech sector, right? Now, what's interesting about the tech sector is that tech is actually ruled by Aquarius. So the tech sector, by its nature, is unstable. So you're trying to build stability in an unstable environment, right? Like if you wanted something stable, you would probably go for something more traditional. But that traditional path would probably take you years and years and years to get to where you want to go. Tech is one of those sectors where you can get to where you want to go really fast, but you can also be destabilized really fast. Like the moment that a new technology comes out, it can put a business out of business overnight, right? And so that level of instability requires a level of flexibility, but also a level of forward thought, right? You always have to be thinking like 5 steps ahead, in terms of, 20 steps ahead in the tech space, but in any Aquarian environment, you always have to be thinking ahead, because you don't have the luxury of just, allowing yourself to climb the ladder, because there are no normal ladders. There's not a lot of normal ladders in the tech sector. Even the ladders that look normal, it is for the most part questionable, right? So for example, I can climb a ladder faster in a startup than I would in a large corporation. And a large corporation has more structure. It's more Capricorn in nature. But if it's in the tech sector, it's Capricorn and Aquarius. So you've got that structure, you've got that stability. Climbing the ladder might take you a long time, but it also might destabilize you as well. There's always this possibility of destabilization. So I kind of wanted to go through the energy and how that energy looks, right? So originally somebody was very traditional. Somebody's going to be transitioning into being non-traditional in their approach. Originally, somebody was following the rules. Now somebody might be either breaking the rules or rebelling in some kind of way. And all of this is due to a shift energetically in the Pluto dynamic, if you are Plutonian or you're going through a Plutonian phase. And that Plutonian phase is very significant to you, right? So that's going to be you're going to be a different self, but you're not only going to be a different self, for this year. It's going to be working on you for some time, and it's going to challenge everything that you thought was real, right? Capricorn is about reality, right? But Aquarius comes in and it destabilizes that reality, because the issue with the Capricorn phase of Saturn is that there's this tendency to get so rigid, to get so crystallized that it becomes stuck, and there's no room for movement, which is what that Four of Pentacles was communicating. And so Aquarius has to come in and break things, basically. It has to shake up some stuff. in order for an individual or society at large to see any progress, which is why Six of Swords came in at the end of the read, right? There's progress, but the progress, it can be painful. It can absolutely be painful, because breaking things, especially things that other people were very attached to, and destabilizing things can be a painful process for a lot of people. Is this justifiable? Absolutely not. Does this make it right? Absolutely not. But this is what change looks like. Change is ugly at times. And it's painful, and it hurts some more than others, oftentimes. But it's an energy that you cannot avoid. And so this energy is teaching you as a Plutonian that, unfortunately, nothing lasts forever. That's one. Not even us, right? There's a time limit on everything and everyone. But also that change is inevitable. And that because change is inevitable, don't think inside a box, think outside of it. This energy is going to force you to think outside of the box. It's going to force you to almost be, I don't think the word that I want to say is radical. I don't really like that word. But it's going to force you to think different. You know, I think that's that motto of Apple. Back when Apple was a lot cooler than it is. I have a bone to pick with Apple, but we're not going to go through how I feel about Apple right now. But, I was an Apple fangirl, and man, I am very upset with them today. But this energy is definitely going to throw a lot of people for a loop. You're going to have people who were leaning one way and then they lean a totally different way out of nowhere. Sometimes there will be not a single warning sign. You will not know how to deal with it. But what it teaches you is to always be prepared. Aquarius energy is about preparation. It's about thinking ahead. It's about constantly being aware of the next steps and, having a plan, right? If this goes to shit, I can do this, right? If this is happening, then I can make this happen over here, right? Because during this time, uncertainty is the signature. It's not stability. Now, I did mention conservative to liberal, but the way this can also look is this. Aquarius is designed to rebel against the status quo. That's what Aquarius does, right? Well, what's interesting is that over the course of the Pluto and Capricorn transit, we had a Saturn and Aquarius phase that kind of introduced us to Pluto and Aquarius. And let me explain how that works. So each planet rules a sign. And when a planet is in a sign that it doesn't rule, then another planet rules that planet, right? So we have Pluto and Aquarius right now. Aquarius is not ruled by Pluto, so it's not in its rulership, right? So you would look to both Saturn, the co-ruler. I call it the co-ruler. Other people will look at it differently, but that's how I feel about it. And then you also look at Uranus. So Saturn and Uranus. You look to these planets to understand how Pluto is going to operate, right? So during Pluto, in Capricorn, when you look to Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, which was in Aquarius. So Pluto is actually already absorbing Aquarius energy, right? So we had a period of time where we kind of got a sample of Pluto in Aquarius through Pluto in Capricorn transit. But the traditionalism was non-traditional. So what was happening was during that time, during that transit of time, you saw a lot of non-traditional people occupying spaces that they normally didn't occupy. You saw, Black and female and queer people in positions of power. And it was very non-traditional. That's Aquarius, right? Traditional is like white, male, straight, right? But the untraditional or the unconventional started to become the convention during Pluto in Capricorn, right? So obviously, if the convention is unconventionality, when Pluto in Aquarius actually hits, this Pluto is rebelling against that convention, that previously established convention, which was unconventionality. So fundamentally, the original convention was conservatism. Then we transitioned into a period where the convention became liberalism for a spell. And this was like during COVID, right? And then people started to rebel against unconventionality being conventional. And that's what you're seeing right now too. So it's almost like a reset to an extent of like, I'm rebelling, like there's a group that was conventional that's rebelling against a group that is non-conventional that has become the standard. And so you might see during this period people come to power who are embodying Aquarius energy. They're rebelling, but they're rebelling against the original rebellion, which was, hey, not everybody has to be a straight white male to be in positions of power, right? Like power can look like this. It can look like a Black woman. It can look like, a non-binary person. It can look like a trans person. It can look like, a Hispanic male. It can look like, an African. It can look like a Muslim. It can look like all of these different things. It doesn't have to be homogenous. And so you're seeing people who were used to the homogeneity rebelling against that standard. And so it's kind of confusing to an extent, just like seeing, because I was thinking, it's so interesting that the power is shifting back to, like the traditional conventionalism, but it's because the traditional conventionalism was not in power, has not been in power recently. And so they're rebelling against this idea of more or less honestly letting everybody in. And if you know anything about Pluto energy, it's about exclusivity, rebelling against the idea that everybody can be accepted and everybody can be in positions of power and everybody can occupy spaces. Now there's this messaging around, hey, you have to be American, which fundamentally just means you're white, right? And, that's what people were used to seeing. I've heard people complain about, movies and advertisements. Why do there have to be gay couples in advertisements? Why do there have to be, mixed race couples, interracial couples in advertisements? There's a woke agenda, right? So you're seeing people rebelling, especially with their dollars, against the quote woke agenda, right? Against this unconventional standard. So liberalism has a new face during this period. you feel like, and it's funny because it's like you're liberal if you're woke. I've kind of follow this loosely. But you're also a rebel if you're rebelling against woke. So it's a confusing energy because both sides are kind of embodying this energy, but in different ways, right? I hate to say sides because I think it's ridiculous that we have sides at this point. And I do think that everybody should have an opportunity. Everybody has the capacity to do amazing things. And I don't think that race or gender or religion or anything determines the level of integrity that you operate with. And I think we've seen that very clearly. Every single race, every single religion, every single gender, every single orientation has its bad apples. And so it's ridiculous to claim that, one side owns that. But I'm getting away from that. Ultimately, what I'm seeing here is this transition. Now, how that transition is going to play out over time is really unfolding. And again, it's going to be unpredictable because of Aquarius. You don't know what's going to happen next. All you can do is prepare. You don't know if 1 minute everything is going to go awry. You don't know if everything is going to be okay. You don't know if this person's going to be boycotted over here. You don't know. You don't know if this company is going to lay people off. You don't know if they're going to collapse or not or go extinct. I was recently reading a LinkedIn post about how the valuation of SaaS companies is dropping, right? Because of this new unpredictable element introduced, which is AI. Now anybody can code or vibe code an app of their own. Well, that introduces uncertainty into the space because now these big players have all of these, I think the post said ankle biters, taking chunks of little teeny tiny chunks of their market share. And what does that do to an industry? How do you maintain stability in an industry where you constantly have a new competitor popping up every single day? Because the cost to becoming a competitor is so low now. And then what do you do when you're working at a company that's this big legacy company, and now you have all of this new competition that you're fighting against? And you're trying to justify your pricing when competitor A over here is doing, is offering kind of the same product or a similar product at a cheaper rate, right? They're building it faster. They don't have a ton of hoops that they have to jump through. They're able to experiment. They're closer to the customer because they're a lean team. Like, you can't compete. I mean, you can, obviously, because you have more resources. But what I mean is this. It introduces a new wild card into the industry. So it makes things unstable and it makes it kind of scary. And so what you're going to see is most likely these companies are going to have to find a way to pivot to maintain dominance, or they're going to probably collapse at some point, because you even have companies, small businesses popping up, and they're like, instead of me investing in XYZ software over here, I'm just going to build it in-house because I don't need this company over here, right? And it's smart. It's cheaper. It's faster. You can get exactly what you want. You don't have to pay extra money to unlock extra features. You can just build the feature yourself. And now I don't need you, right? It's kind of like the biggest middle finger to these like major players. It's like, F you, we don't need you. We don't have to give you our money, and you don't have to bully us into giving, us your money and charging us exorbitant fees to run, a profitable business. We don't have to deal with that anymore. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of people who are resisting or rebelling against these big legacy players being like, well, actually, I could just build a version of what you already have for myself. I don't have to pay you, right? So how do you, like, let's say, you're in the sales department or in the marketing department, how do you even position yourself against that odd? Because now the competition isn't just people building software that's comparable to yours, but it's also people are able to build software in-house specifically made for their company, and therefore they don't have to ask you for features. They're building them themselves. Like, you're competing against people who can just build what they need themselves. This unpredictability, this uncertainty is really encouraging every single one of us to keep our head on a swivel, really, and to recognize that nothing that we knew to be the standard will remain the standard much longer. And for now, like liberalism was the standard for like 2.5 seconds. And now it's going to go back to, traditional, hey, if you're, homogenous in this way, you'll have opportunities. But I don't think it's going to stay that way because of the nature of Aquarius energy. Because once that becomes the standard, there's this energy, there's going to be this shift, there's going to be this Plutonian urge to shift that standard. The point of Aquarius, too, is Aquarius is actually about diversity. Capricorn is not. And that's why this is so interesting, the way that this energy is playing out. But Aquarius is also about humanity. And you hear there are a lot of humanitarian themes in Aquarius. And you're seeing a lot of humanitarian concerns coming up during this transit, and understanding the humanity of other people. I've seen the dehumanization of people, whether it be based off of their religion or their gender or their skin color, etc. And that dehumanization is coming up during this transit a lot. And how we address that as a society. Because fundamentally, when you take all of the labels, that Capricorn energy, when you take all of the labels out of everything, we're all just human beings. We're all a part of the human race, right? There's no real box. We just create it. We create these hierarchies. We create these boxes, but they're illusions. They're not real, right? And I think that that's the point of Aquarius, is to collapse that, to collapse these boxes and these labels and these statuses. Because they're not real and because they do a great disservice to certain people, right? It's not okay to dehumanize someone for being, a Muslim or Black or trans or gay or, Irani. It's not okay. And even Jewish. It's not okay to dehumanize these people. These are human beings, right? And the cruelty that some of these human beings face is not called for, right? But there's also people who do face cruelty, whether you want to acknowledge that cruelty or not. It's not okay to dehumanize white people. It's not okay to dehumanize men, right? Even though there is a history of, a specific kind of people being in places of power and them consistently dehumanizing others while they've been in power. It's really technically not okay to give them back that same energy. So, because all it does is it creates karma. And that's really what Saturn is about. It's about karma, right? The things that you do to people do eventually come back to you. Now, it might take some centuries. It might take some, right? But they do come back to you. And what you've seen with, the political shifts in the past is that, traditionally with the Capricorn energy, traditionally, You only saw white faces in movies. You only saw healthy white relationships. You only saw straight people and straight relationships and straight couples, right? There was no representation of anybody indigenous. Hell, I think indigenous people were actually played by white people in movies back in the day, which is crazy, right? Like, you want to tell the story, which is not even an accurate story of an indigenous person, but you're not even going to pay an indigenous person to be a part of that story. So back in the day, you see this constantly. You saw Robert Downey Jr. in blackface. You saw so many things. They would rather pay Robert Downey Jr. as a black man than to just pay a black man for a movie. So and it's funny watching now, like seeing a lot of movies coming out where traditionally white roles are being replaced by trans people and black people and stuff like that. And these people are having a fit. Okay. They are having a fit. They're like, that's not historically accurate. And it's just like, well, you did it. You did it. And you did it for years. So now that you get to see how not okay that is, you want to complain when it's coming to your door. And I think that that's funny because the karma is real. But on the flip side, because the karma is real, karma is a cycle. So when you do something to people, when you exclude people, at some point you're going to get excluded. Well, the problem with that is that when those people start to exclude you, eventually you're going to be put in a position, or you're going to find yourself in a position where you can exclude them, and the cycle continues. So I think what I'm trying to say is, where does it end? I'm ranting now. Where does the cycle end? Where does the karmic cycle end? I feel like humans have had the capacity to evolve, which is really fundamentally what Pluto is about. It's about evolution. We've had the capacity to evolve past the Capricorn labels. But we're really hell-bent on not doing that for some reason. And so the karma will continue. The out crowd will become the in crowd one day. Then they'll become the out crowd again. And it'll just continue. It'll continue. I think that the moment we wake up as a society is the moment we realize, like, okay, each of us are wrong. We each did this to each other. Let's stop. Let's stop dehumanizing each other. Right? We're both human. We're both a part of the human race. Like, wow, that would be amazing. Like, that would be such an amazing reality. But I think there are a lot of people who are resistant to that reality because it doesn't make money. I'm just going to be honest about that. There's no money to be made in peace. Or at least that's what they think. But there's a lot of money to be made in chaos, because the fundamental premise of capitalism, and I'm not like a communist or anything, like I'm not socialist or anything, but I do notice the fundamental premise of capitalism is problems. If the more problems you have to solve, the more businesses you can create, the more money you can make, right? If you don't have problems to solve, what can you really offer? I think that's kind of the gist of the capitalistic society. We have to have problems. And granted, I think as a society we'll always have problems. But I think the manufactured social problems create these hierarchies that people need in order to feel some type of way about themselves. And it's exhausting. I just think it's very exhausting. I do. I think I'm just tired of it. I would love for humanity to truly evolve. And I have no expectation of us doing so anytime soon. Especially since Pluto is in Aquarius. The only way it almost seems like the only way that this is going to happen is violently. And Pluto is violence. It is. Now, Pluto was in Capricorn, and that violence was being exemplified in the conservative camp. Now you're seeing that violence transition into the liberal camp. You're seeing the violence pick up. And I'm not saying one side is more violent than the other. I think both are violent. I think the liberal side is actually matching the conservatives' energy. And the conservatives, again, of course, are like, oh, woe is me. That's not fair, right? So it's like, you can be the bully, but then when you get bullied back, you start whining, right? And so it's funny. It's so interesting to watch karma play out. And to watch how people just refuse to acknowledge that that's what it is. This is a big rant. This is such a big rant. So bless you if you're still listening, because it's a big rant. But yeah, it's an interesting shift. This reading is definitely about an interesting shift occurring in someone's life, occurring in our lifetimes. Because this is a lifetime. This is generation. This is a generational shift. It's not like just an individual experience, but you're probably going to feel it more than most everybody else because you are a Plutonian or because you're going through a Plutonian phase of life. You're going to feel it a lot stronger. It's going to be intense. It's going to be hard. And yeah, I wanted to make that explanation because, I just felt the need to. I like to explain energy because I'm big on energy and I'm big on understanding the energetic signatures around me, what kind of energy I'm absorbing, what frequency of that energy I'm absorbing. For example, Aquarian energy can be as high as humanitarianism and being activist, and it can be as low as anarchist and creating chaos, right? So what frequency am I on, right? There's a lot of chaos magicians out here right now on social media, but there's also a lot of people who want to see the good of humanity unfold. And those are also the same energy, but at a higher frequency. And so I think my mission here is to raise the frequency. You know, I get a lot of messages from my guides saying that I need to put content out there. And honestly, I'm hesitant because there's so much negative energy out there. There's so much low frequency energy out there. And I'm hypersensitive, not in terms of like, you know, people saying mean things, but I'm sensitive to energy. Like I can feel it, right? And so I really got to cleanse when I encounter some BS. And that's even when I go out into the world, I can feel the heaviness on people, the heaviness. I can feel the difficult decisions people are making. I don't even know what those decisions are, but I can feel it. I can feel the stress. I can feel the anger. I can feel the tension. I can feel all of the crazy stuff that they're programming themselves. I can feel it. And I'm exhausted when I come home. And I ain't even do anything. So I'm going to do my best. And if you rock with me, you rock with me. And I appreciate you for that. But I hope that this kind of clarifies the energy a little bit. I'll explain energy more throughout my readings. Eventually, I'll create like a little community and we can just talk nothing but energy. But yeah, I just wanted to add this little bit that became a big bit.